And ES, this is a good transition, says Army needs to pay for messing up those soldiers' GRAP. That is what we're going to get into, because we're now seeing a massive backpedal when it comes to that big issue where there are a bunch of people from the National Guard that were allowed to get bonuses, or some people would say kickbacks, from being able to recruit people. And now the Army is seeing how bad this public affairs issue has blown up in their face, as they've done nothing about it, but it looks like they're trying to do something about it. So let's go into it. And can we just do a commend for Navy, I apologize, that's my fault, for Task and Purpose. And it is, again, Haley Brzezinski. So she is the only one I've seen covering this in continuation. I love continuing stories. So she titles it, "The Army Screwed Over Soldiers in an Enlistment Bonus Fraud Investigation. Now it's trying to fix it." Now, it's been a little over a week, or 2 weeks, since that initial one, where we saw this, but it says the Army is reviewing the cases of almost 2,000 soldiers who are part of a far-reaching fraud investigation that started a decade ago, who may have been incorrectly added to a national criminal database despite never being charged with a crime. Now, let's add on to that the fact that you could say accidentally, but if you don't remember from the past video where I made about this, this came from the Army CID Criminal Investigation Department, which looks into these things and pushed information to the FBI. This is not, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, not a stretch, not an accident, but that's my perception looking at it. I don't want you to forget the very key verbiage. And I'm not saying this is Haley's agenda here, but it says the Army Criminal Investigation Division is conducting a review of 1,900 soldiers roughly a decade after the service investigated suspected fraud within a recruiting assistance program, officials announced on Thursday. Between 2012 and 2016, CID conducted over 900 investigations. And again, to remind you, that was 900 of there were several thousand, so it was only a fraction of what they actually were charging. And to these fraud related to the contractor-run National Guard Recruiting Assistance Program known as GRAP, and the Army Reserve Recruiting Assistance Program, ARRAP. Greg Ford, director of Army CID, told reporters on Thursday that the Associated Press reported that the investigation involved 100,000 people and hundreds of thousands of dollars in potentially fraudulent bonus payment. In total, Ford said there were 137 prosecutions and 286 adverse administrative actions as a result of the investigations, and says CID takes our responsibilities in this area very seriously, Ford said, and it is clear that we fell short in a large number of these investigations. We're dedicated to completing a review of our processes and policies and training to ensure such errors do not reoccur. All right, let's get back into some numbers here. They were saying that due to this program, what was reported, they can try and put the blame back on this investigation in regards to Associated Press. I would ask, what would their motive be to inflate the numbers to so, astronomically high? Because they reported that the CID or FBI, combination of those, was saying $100 million was fraudulently given out to soldiers for this program, and showed that when they actually investigated, there was only about $400,000 that were actually accounted for. Now, mind you, you do the math there, we're talking about not even 1%. So why would Associated Press just come up with this number of $100 million? Just made it up? The reports that were done to Congress saying how bad this was just made up? I doubt they would have done that. And the incentive there, it sounds like they're playing it down. That's my perspective on it. And they take their investigations very seriously. I will hold my laughter when it comes to that, because we all know there are a lot of people that do not believe in their investigative ability, especially as this is overlooked and they did no due process to label these people as criminals. Nothing. But it says the GRAP and ARRAP offered people $2,000 bonuses if they referred someone to an Army recruiter and the individual ended up enlisting. According to Army Times, the program was a success, resulting in approximately 130,000 enlistments in 7 years. I don't hear anybody saying pat on the back, awesome. The people that probably created this program are the people that got pats on the back that are probably retired now. And as I said in my previous video, I want to reiterate this. The decision to allow this to be greenlit was not made in a vacuum. Somebody with stars, somebody with political power signed something and said, this is allowed. So it's not like these Army people that were taking advantage of this just came with this program willy-nilly or, filling out random pieces of paper. That's not what happens. But it says, but the Army's audit agency's fraud risk assessment quotations identified systemic weaknesses in the program in an Army release on Thursday said, including insufficient oversight and fraud at the recruiter level below. And that's because they were like buddying up, trying to get as much from the cash cow as they could, which you can't blame soldiers that are going to Joe it up as much as they can. It says, while a small number of the total amount of people involved in the investigation were actually charged, many soldiers who were never charged or prosecuted said they have still suffered adverse consequences. And this is part of the video that Fox did. Now, I'm going to tell you, a lot of the people that were located or covered in that Fox interview or documentary series of this, they were only finding out for a few different reasons. That's if they got out and wanted to work at a civilian law enforcement agency. It came out for a Captain 03 equivalent for people that are part of other branches, that this man could not put on the rank of 04 due to being under investigation, which he was never even made aware of until he was deployed over in Afghanistan and he came back from a foot patrol. Like, imagine being told, hey, you're doing our country's biddings, but you're not able to promote, and you are in one of the most high in demand areas, and you have no idea what actually happened from this, and you thought you were doing these things that the military, the Army specifically needed, which was people and meeting the mission even beyond what you're already doing, which was a deployment. Crazy. Oh my God. It says here, all right, so Army Times reported on one such case involving an active duty officer, Captain Justin, I can't say his last name here, this guy we're talking about, in Lubbock, Texas, who's identified in his permanent record as having been a subject of a criminal investigation despite the federal government declining to prosecute him. And these statements that are going on their official record, I forget the actual word, they might cover it here in a little bit, but it pretty much says you were arrested for this possible crime. So you don't actually have any true, you are guilty because of this or you are innocent. It was pretty much under the assumption you are guilty because there's been no outcome of it and it's just sitting in like this kind of pending limbo status. And these soldiers, or I should say veterans for some of them, had no recourse to correct this action. And as the Army did nothing about it, now they've gone to the media and this is kind of what we're seeing unfold. But it says Talaromani, I think is how you say it, was titled, a process that occurs when there is quotations credible information that the individual in question has quotations committed in a criminal offense and they're identified by law enforcement as the primary suspect in the investigation. Again, just a suspect. Not guilty. The Army said on Thursday, and while the Army emphasized that being titled does not indicate guilt or innocence, Army Times reported that the veterans have found themselves, quotations, entered into an FBI criminal database anyway. Now, what does that mean for them, right? Like, the Army can downplay this as much as they want. They can look at this and be like, oh, no big deal. You know what I mean? They were just titled, no big deal. But some of these people could no longer work, could no longer purchase weapons. I don't want to know if they were on some kind of TSA list where they'd be patted down or whatever else that could be in there to say, watch out for these guys. Maybe they didn't even correlate it and they're like, this is weird. I'm being, questioned here, because we do know that a lot of these agencies, like you're seeing with CID and FBI, they're all talking to each other because they want to share that information because they saw how flawed the FBI was years and years and decades ago. But that is something I look at here. And I just have to say, it's easy for the Army or the military or whoever they are, CID, whoever, can say that when your rights to pursuit of happiness and freedom are there, especially when you've not been able to get your due process, if this was the case. It's easy when the Army is not putting food on a table for children, which that Army lieutenant had, I think he had, I don't even know how many, I think it was more than 5 kids. He is a captain, a freaking 03, depending on that paycheck. And he has to put food on the table. It's easy for them to say that. It just baffles me, man. It really does. And by the way, he doesn't continue serving. If you didn't watch that video, I'll link it down in the description below eventually. But it says that kind of information can be determined to an individual going through a background check for a job or security clearance, which many of these people didn't know until it happened. It says that this prior captain told Army Times that the titling got in the way of his promotion to major as it came back as quotations adverse information in his file. And quotations, the Army ruined my life and career over $2,000 GRAP payment, he said. $2,000, you know, and when I looked at this situation when it first came out, I said, who got their hand stuck in the cookie jar? Who out here was needing to justify that they were not in the wrong and we just blame all these soldiers? Who got off the hook, right? Because I say whoever greenlit this program, their name is on a piece of paper. There is some authority there, like I've already mentioned. And the example I used previously was if you move in the military, who has to sign that off for the funding for that, which is thousands of dollars? It is a star of some kind that signs that, right? And so for something like this, there's a star that signs it or is saying money can go out and goes in there. It would be tracked down. So not made in a vacuum. All right, but it says, now the Army said it's reviewing titling actions as a result of the investigation to determine if the titling was appropriate or not. By the way, it took them, all this outcry for it to finally happen. If they find that the title was not warranted, their titling record, quotations, will be expunged from the Department of Defense records, the release said. While officials said they were conducting a full review of cases, they encouraged people to submit requests for a review at CID's website if they believe they were improperly identified as a result of the investigation. I am looking at this and I would say, pump the brakes, okay? CID, you did wrong. You should be held accountable. You should be the one reaching out to everybody because you have not done your due diligence and you may have improperly put this in someone's record. Not that individual. Why are they having to write you about their record? Which, by the way, like we've already mentioned, these people didn't even know until it impacted their life in a horrendous way. Losing jobs, losing promotions, all these other things. So CID gets away with this and just gets to, willy-nilly go on with their way. It pisses me off. I don't know how you can justify this. You were in the wrong. Jesus. But it says, but for many, it may be too late, and it's unclear what the Army plans to do about it. That guy's not going to get back his time for the military service. They're not going to go let him put on his uniform. They're not going to go make sure the food was on his table or the power was on, or God forbid if they had to run up credit card bills or debt, to make things happen. They're not going to erase that. And that's why I look at this, and I hope these guys sue. If they're going to do it, I hope they do because their rights were infringed, and it's very obvious. And the Army is sitting here like, I guess we'll wait and see. Let's see how pissed off they get. They probably don't have enough money. Somebody should pro bono this if they can. Man, Lieutenant General Douglas Stitt, the Army's chief of personnel, told reporters on Thursday that if an individual has a question about their file and what impacts it had on their promotion or separation from the military, they can, quotations, come forward with a claim and the Army will facilitate to assist them. I've already made my point clear. I don't think that is a proactive way to do it. It is very reactive. And I would say for all of the money and resources that are out there, fraud, waste, abuse we see, if you've ever been in the military or a government sector and you can see where this stuff happens, I would say I could justify as a taxpayer, I would want my money to go to something like this, where we've all seen things that were like, these government contracts are so expensive. They're at a premium. You buy, God forbid, Coke Zero from some place or whatever, and it's more expensive than if you just went to the store yourself. All right. Asked if the Army was prepared to offer any kind of financial assistance to those who may have lost out on civilian jobs or military promotions because of the Army's mistakes. Officials did not offer specifics, but said individuals could find the answers on CID's website and seek the remedy they need. This is the level of hoops that these people are going through. They want to talk to a human being. This is equivalent to saying, go to our website to find your answer on a frequently asked questions page, or talk to some chat in there to see if your question's been answered, or if somebody can generate a generic ass response. You're dealing with 2,000 people with different ranks, different situations. One could have been active duty at the time. One could have gotten out. One could have been a police officer. These are all different factors. They all have different scopes of skills and jobs that are being paid for, and families that were impacted, and situations based on where they lived at, where if you lived in California versus Kentucky, middle of nowhere, those costs are going to be different. The litigation needs to take place. Jeez. Says quotations, in terms of individuals impacted by these record corrections, the website that has been referenced multiple times will be a primary source for those to reach out to get guidance in order to assist them, Stitt said. One, in demanding or determining where they think they may have been impacted in getting relief, whether it be an evaluation which they determine or think may have impacted their moving forward or promotion. All that information is online, and the team is ready to assist in that regard. You have their information. You probably do. You had enough information to charge them and find their record, and you had the information of who to contact at the FBI. But God forbid you actually try and use your resources to locate somebody, to say that they were wrongfully charged or titled in this pseudo way. It baffles me, man. It really does. It says, the review comes a year since the Army announced a total restructuring at CID by putting a civilian forward in charge of the division and bringing in more civilian investigators. The issue of incentive bonuses for recruitment has also been raised recently as the Army works to overcome the worst recruiting shortage in decades. So I look at this and I say, yes, they're trying to fix that $50,000 to certain recruits going out there, $25,000 here. They are throwing money at this, where I look at it and I look at this program and I say, you're paying service members $2,000 to be able to serve, right? And we don't know if these National Guardsmen or whoever got bonuses when they signed the contract too, but I'm going to bet and say they probably didn't get $50,000. So this probably was actually a money saving, right? On top of that, they weren't paying these people to sit in a recruiting office, go to recruiting school, do all these other things. So they saved a lot of money. So they are literally counting, I would say, pennies at this point. You had people doing the job for recruiters, like pseudo recruiters. You had people that were cadets, not even actually in the service yet, as serving active duty, that were going through ROTC programs that were helping recruit. So I find it hilarious that we ever painted a bunch about this. And in my opinion, this should be a wipe slate clean thing. But again, people got the mission met. Over 100,000 people made it into the Army. And, the mission was met then. No one was crying. So, but it says, during a roundtable in September with reporters, the head of the National Guard said they were considering the option of paying soldiers a bonus, quotations, for anybody that they bring into the organization that's able to complete their military training. And it says, asked how they would prevent having some of these same issues as were investigated in 2012, General Daniel Hokanson said they would implement a firm set of rules and orders that really set the terms and conditions under which they really eliminate the opportunity for what had happened previously. So, mind you, they were all trying to get cuts of money. You know what I mean? This was a major loophole in the system. The only way I could think that they would ever be able to loophole it is they would say, oh, there's a cap on how many soldiers you can claim are actually going to be able to join the military. But that doesn't change because you're just going to keep playing leapfrog to the next one until someone's like, I've already done it, man. I'm maxed out. I got 3. You know what I mean? So this system inherently is bad, right? And my thing is, like, when you're down this bad, you're worried about soldiers making a lot of money, helping you do the job that you can't do. They are doing it. And with less training, less resources, and every bit of the word of recruiting, I find this crazy. It Says, quotations, at the end of the day, it was successful with what it was trying to accomplish. Yes, it was. But the means and process really need to be refined and fixed so that doesn't happen again, Hokanson said. Because God forbid a soldier gets its way and actually does something that helps the military and also benefits himself in that way. Mustangs are so expensive. It says, but it's one of those things, one of many options that we're looking at. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is what we are dealing with right now. That is where we're at. That is what we're seeing. The Army is still trying to go back to it, and because they see where it's at. When you look at this, these guys here are probably going to sit here and say, is this really how they're going to fix this? Is this going to make it right? I don't think so. I've already mentioned their financial hardship. I've already mentioned their rights being an issue that are not being respected in that way. Lastly, the emotional toll that would take on a family. Overnight being told, you are no longer going to be in the Army and you're going into scatterbrain. You're trying to save every penny. You're trying to think if you have everything. Like the emotional turmoil that would come with that. And that one guy said it. The former captain, he said, I would cry at night. A grown man with how many kids? 5+ and a wife. He said, I would cry almost every night because of GRAP, because of a $2,000 bonus. I don't know, man. I don't know.